We're going to go ahead and get started now. I was really happy we're able to do this presentation this afternoon. These folks did this for the Arkansas Library Association, and I found it such an important and exciting topic, and they had so much good information that I thought we wanted to be sure that we were able to offer this for SLIM folks as well. So I'm not going to take any more time. I'm going to go right to them and let them introduce themselves and get started with their topic, and then we'll have time for questions at the end as well.
All right, hi and welcome. I'm Allie Stevens. I'm the director at Calhoun County Library in Hampton, Arkansas.
Hi, I'm Janice Weddle. I'm the Assistant Librarian for Instruction and Outreach, the Head of Public Services at Hendrix College in Conway, Arkansas.
Hello, my name is Shawna Thorup, and I'm the Head of Reference and Instruction at Northwest Arkansas Community College.
So our presentation today is called The Google Effect, How Search Engines, YouTube, and Other Sites Promote Misinformation. And as Tina said, we originally did this for the Arkansas Library Association. We are the officers of the Reference and Instruction Services Division of ARLA. So here's a quick little video just as an introduction.
I worked as a mathematician and then as a quant in finance. I saw the worst of finance. I went into data science and I was struck by what I thought was essentially a lie, namely that algorithms were being presented and marketed as objective fact. A much more accurate description of an algorithm is that it's an opinion embedded in math. An algorithm is a very general concept. It's something that we do actually in our heads every day. To build an algorithm, we need only two things, essentially, a historical data set and a definition of success. So I build an algorithm to cook dinner for my family. The data that I use on a daily basis is the ingredients in my kitchen, sometimes the time I have, the ambition I have for that dinner. And then I assess the dinner after the fact. Was it a success? I define that because I'm the one who's building the meals. I'm in charge. I have the power. So there's always a power element here. So I get to decide a meal is successful if my kids ate vegetables. My kids, if they were in charge, would have defined it differently. And it matters because as we optimize over time, we optimize to success. The succession of meals that I cook from month to month is a very different path of meals than if my son were in charge. So we do that every time we build algorithms. We curate our data, we define success, we embed our values into algorithms. So when people tell you algorithms make things objective, you say no. Algorithms make things work for the builders of the algorithms. In general, we have a situation where algorithms are extremely powerful in our daily lives, but there's a barrier between us and the people building them. And those people are typically coming from a kind of homogeneous group of people who have their particular incentives. If it's in a corporate setting, usually profit, and not usually a question of fairness for the people who are subject to their algorithms. So we always have to penetrate this fortress. We have to be able to question the algorithms themselves, especially when they're very important to us. We have to inject ethics into the process of building algorithms, and that starts with data scientists agreeing and signing to a Hippocratic oath of modeling. But we have to stop blindly trusting algorithms to be fair. They are not inherently fair, and start looking into what they're actually doing.
All right. So this is a comic strip from Project Information Literacy. PIL is a nonprofit research organization that studies how new adults, so younger adults, find and use information in college and beyond. And this Life in the Age of Algorithms cartoon was written by Jessica Yurkovsky in 2019. So information about our online and offline habits is being collected 24/7. These data are processed immediately and they're reflected back to us across multiple platforms. And this is happening on a massive scale in real time. More data helps platforms predict and influence our behavior more easily. By targeting the ads and other information that we're seeing to our personal behaviors online, And this creates the possibility for two people, even those who may be very similar geographically and demographically, to experience entirely different realities based on the information targeted to them by algorithms. More and more often, our lives are affected by the data correlations that are recognized by artificial intelligence or AI software. But these software programs are making generalizations using incomplete data, which greatly amplifies existing personal biases. Information systems that we depend on are shaped by a technology culture that's marked by narrow perspectives and overconfidence. And that profits when they can influence our behavior to make it more predictable, often by feeding into our pre-existing biases in ways that undermine our trust in news, politics, and each other. So being aware of how your own data can be used against you is a good way to start seeing past the curtain that's created by algorithms online. So first, we're going to go over some important vocabulary. These are our keywords: algorithmic literacy, algorithmic justice, artificial intelligence, attention economy, big data, personalization, and surveillance capitalism. So an algorithm is a finite set of mathematical instructions that exists to solve a problem or complete a task. They control everything from which friends posts you see on Facebook to which ads you see on the New York Times website. And entire academic conferences have been held to discuss the ways in which algorithms act as a form of social control and social engineering. Algorithmic literacy is a subset of information literacy and a critical awareness of what algorithms are, how they interact with human behavioral data in information systems, and an understanding of the social and ethical issues related to the use of algorithms. Algorithmic justice refers to the application of social justice and applied ethics principles to the design, deployment, regulation, and ongoing use of algorithmic systems to reduce the potential for harm. Algorithmic justice promotes awareness and sensitivity among coders and the general public about how data collection practices, machine learning, AI, and algorithms may encode and exacerbate inequality and discrimination. Artificial intelligence, which frequently we just refer to as AI, refers to the ability of computer software to be programmed to think like humans and to mimic human behaviors like generalization, reasoning, discovering meaning, and learning from past experience. The attention economy applies economic theory and practices to human attention spans as limited and valuable resources. The commodification of the collective human capacity to engage with things that require our focus. Big data. This is referring to massive sets of data that can be analyzed in order to interpret and learn to predict human behaviors and to predict our decision-making tendencies. Personalization is the modification of your specific digital experience based on what algorithms perceive are your personal preferences and interests. Personalization's image of us is like looking at yourself in a carnival house of mirrors. Personalization characterizes us, and it creates a big gap between our real interests and personality and their digital reflection. Surveillance capitalism refers to a new economic philosophy and system in which our human experiences are used as the free raw material extracted and modified for the hidden commercial interests of others. So I'm going to turn it over to Shawna now, and she is going to, to Janice now, and she is going to do a deep dive into some resources.
Yes. Thank you, Allie. So as Allie said, I'm going to start talking through a little bit deeper dive of some of the resources. We've highlighted just a few of the resources to actually talk about here in the presentation. We have a much more extensive list available on our handout that we'll be including a link in the chat later on in the presentation. And then that will also be posted up with the recording of this session later as well. Could you take me to the next slide, please? Okay. The first resource that we really wanted to highlight for everyone is really one of the foundational texts giving some good background information on this subject, and that is 2018's Algorithms of Oppression by Sophia Umoja Noble. This book is about how negative biases against women of color are embedded in search engine results and algorithms. Particularly drawing attention to how racist and sexist those search results were. It argues that data discrimination is a real social problem. Noble argues that the combination of private interests in promoting certain sites, along with the monopoly status of a relatively small number of internet search engines, leads to a biased set of search algorithms that privilege whiteness and that discriminate against people of color in general, and especially against women of color. This is still an ongoing problem. This book came out in 2018, and some things were addressed in search and the way that search works, but it is still happening in the advertising section on Google. Yin and Sankin wrote a news piece back in July of this year, noticing that in Google's ad buying portal, if you search for Black girls, it will return hundreds of terms that are leading to adult content, to pornography. And here we have on the slide an example of searching for famous scientists. This is an image search that we actually just performed the other day, famous scientists. The results in some of the collages include a few women, but by and large, it is very male, very white for the results that come up for that search. The next slide, please. We also wanted to highlight this book by Shoshana Zuboff, The Age of Surveillance Capitalism, The Fight for a Human Future at the New Frontier of Power. Professor Zuboff was a professor emerita at Harvard Business School and former faculty at the Berkman Klein Center for Internet and Society at Harvard Law School. And this text traces the rise of a system she calls surveillance capitalism as an economic philosophy, primarily within Google, Facebook, and Microsoft, that those are by no means the only companies making use of this type of economic philosophy. She characterizes surveillance capitalism as a coup from above because it operates through unprecedented asymmetries in knowledge and the power that accrues to knowledge. Surveillance capitalists know everything about us, but their operations are unknowable to us. They accumulate vast domains of knowledge from us, but not for us. That is the raw material that they are selling to produce their profits. Next slide, please. This is a resource that you may have heard about. It was quite prominently in the news a few weeks ago, a couple of months ago. The Social Dilemma. This is a documentary film that was just released in 2020. And if you've not seen it, it has three main dilemmas that it points out about social media. And the first of those dilemmas is mental health. And this is talking about an addiction and anxiety and depression. One of the things that they highlight within this documentary is that higher social media use correlates to self-reported declines in mental and physical health. The second prong of the dilemmas that are addressed here is the democracy dilemma, specifically in terms of political polarization and divisiveness. The content that promotes outrage and that really sharp negative reaction, that is fuel for greater engagement on these platforms. And so there's really an incentive built into the structure of the platform itself that rewards those those fake news, those bits of really divisive content that are going to promote strong emotional reactions in people. The number of countries with active political disinformation campaigns are estimated to have doubled in the past 2 years. And then the third dilemma that they identify is the discrimination dilemma. And this is really talking about the larger topic that we're talking about today, algorithmic bias and the amplification of hate. From an internal Facebook report in 2018, they noted that 64% of the people who joined extremist groups on Facebook did so because the algorithms steered them to those groups. Next slide, please. Thank you. We also wanted to highlight the resources available from the Algorithmic Justice League. The Justice League is interested in illuminating the social implications and harms of artificial intelligence. They have a library of research and educational materials available through their website that we have linked within the handout as well. And they had a documentary film in 2020 called Coded Bias. And Coded Bias explores racial and gender bias embedded in AI, especially in terms of facial recognition software. And how that can be problematic as those facial recognition softwares get used more and more in our society, including by law enforcement agencies. Thank you. The next slide here is talking about project information literacy and a report that came out in January pre-pandemic, and so then it kind of got lost in the news, we think, but information literacy in the age of algorithms. And this report was the result of researchers conducting 16 focus groups with about 103 undergraduates and about 37 faculty members from 8 different US colleges and universities across the country. And their findings suggest that a majority of students know that popular websites such as Google, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook use algorithms to collect massive amounts of their personal data, but they still find those sites too useful to abandon, as I imagine most of us in this room would as well. Many of the students are indignant about the websites that mine their clicks to sell them products, but they're resigned to that's just the way that it is in an unregulated media environment. Some students tried to make use of some practical strategies to protect their privacy and confuse the algorithms. But an abundance of choice for online information left many of them skeptical and distrustful of news that they encounter on algorithm-driven platforms, which I'm sure is sounding familiar to all of us as well. And while some students were worried about the creepy way that ads followed them around the internet, others were concerned, as I think we are, as we were looking at this topic, that this automated decision-making of systems through these algorithms is reinforcing societal inequalities. Next slide, please. There are a multitude of TED Talks available on various aspects of this topic as well. And we've highlighted here on the slide just a few and included those in the handout that we'll provide as well. From just this past August, there was a TED Talk titled Dear Facebook, This is How You're Breaking Democracy. This was given by a former employee of Facebook briefly, and then also a former operative for the CIA who worked in community development, what they really consider the hearts and minds campaigns piece of what the CIA does. There's another talk there from December of 2017 called Can We Protect AI from Our Biases? This was an investigative journalist doing research specifically on AI and how those systems are developed. Tristan Harris gave a TED Talk in April of 2017 about how a handful of tech companies control billions of minds every day. Harris was prominently featured in the documentary The Social Dilemma as well. So if that name or the image looks familiar, perhaps you saw the documentary as well. And then all the way back in 2011, Eli Pariser gave a TED Talk about beware of online filter bubbles, talking about kind of the filter bubble effect of how we consume media and the limitations of what we are seeing, what we are shown by different platforms and algorithms. And now I'm going to turn it over to Shawna.
Thank you, Janice. So you've kind of gotten the lay of the land from Allie and Janice, what this is and how people have been studying it and thinking about it. And my part of the presentation is to talk about how we as information professionals, as librarians, can take this out into our community. As a community college librarian, and I was a public librarian before that, I started as a children's librarian. I'm very hands-on, I'm very pragmatic, I'm very practical. And so I'm gonna run you through some things that you could do with your community, no matter what environment you're in or where you kind of hope to go. Next slide, please, Allie. First of all, I hope I don't have to convince anyone in the group that we should be taking it to our communities. You all probably know the infamous Michael Moore quote about librarians being subversive, right? That people think we're quiet and just sitting at a desk, but we're actually plotting the revolution, right? This is something that we have been really interested in for a long time, especially vis-a-vis privacy. Privacy literacy has been something librarians have been known for since we basically started in this country back with Benjamin Franklin. In fact, tomorrow, ALA is doing a privacy literacy reboot where they're talking about social justice and algorithmic bias and how we take that to our community. I can share the info for that workshop tomorrow if anybody wants it. But I think the most important thing we can do as info professionals is acknowledge our own use and our processes that contribute both to bias and to invasion of privacy and to skewing of results and the creation of the reality of our end users, right? So a lot of public libraries in general, they provide personalized recommendations based on borrowing records, right? If you're in a K-12 library or a public library, you may come into contact with internet content filters, and they're using algorithms to determine what gets through and what doesn't get through, right? Pretty much every library I've worked at in the modern era has had some kind of a federated search engine, right? So my library uses EBSCO Discovery Service, and EDS is definitely using algorithms to determine not just what it's showing, what comes up, but the ranking, right? And so of course, EBSCO privileges their own content before all of the other things that it's searching. So before Gale, and laugh at you if you want ProQuest in there, but I digress. But we're definitely using algorithms. All of our databases or research portals that we're giving to our students or to our communities have these underlying algorithms that are learning from our patron searches. As soon as you put in something, it gives you some suggestions. Where do you think it got those from? It's mining our data. There are some libraries, especially in Europe, that are looking at mobile apps and use of smartphone data. They're trying to commercialize the experience, especially in a public library where it's like you're in Walmart and it knows where you are and there's a map to get you to the aisle of where that fiction book is. And that has repercussions for privacy and our end users. Those of us in academic libraries, we're using analytics out of and monitoring what our students are doing. I know how many times my students have watched my explainer videos. I know if they've watched the whole video. I know where they stopped. If you're in academics and you're publishing, your H index is increasingly being driven by algorithms and where your results are popping up when people are searching for your topics. H-index is a measure of your impact, your publishing impact, which is a big factor in tenure decisions, right? I already talked about privacy literacy. We've been doing that since the beginning of time pretty much, but a little bit about resistant spectatorship. It comes out of critical information literacy theory. And sorry, as an academic librarian, these kind of pedagogical approaches are the kind of things that make me excited. But resistant spectatorship is basically what we're preaching in this workshop, that we don't just become passive consumers of this, that we take steps to change the technology, to change our end users' behaviors of the technology, to protect them, and to create a more just, equitable, and fair experience for them. Next slide, please, Allie. So if you have no time at all, asynchronous, and you're in a library, my first suggestion is you make DuckDuckGo your public PC's default search engines. A lot of us default to Google and other things, but DuckDuckGo is really great with the privacy. I suggest that you provide your end users with curated lists of reading, viewing, and listening to encourage them to learn more about this and why it actually matters, right? And to just use your platforms to get out the word so that you can show people that it doesn't have to be this way. This world and this reality of the Google effect is the way it is because we allow it to be that way in some ways. Next slide, please, Allie. So if you have some short time, 15 minutes or less, under the little timer, there's for all ages, click. If you've not done the website, click. I could watch that forever. That's really fun. I encourage you to play around with that. And it's a really nice introduction for all ages on how algorithms are working when you're just on a random website, especially a shopping website, and you're looking at the screen, how things are tracking you and what are you clicking and where's your mouse going. If you're working with kids, I've got a bunch of resources for you here, short takes that you can get in. Believe it or not, there's recommended picture books on these types of issues that you can use in a preschool story time. I recommend using short videos with people. They tend to be very impactful, low cost, low entry point for that. And then I do a lot with explainers. I'll take something big like the Cambridge Analytica files from The Guardian, and I'll break those down into smaller digestible chunks for my students. Next slide, please, Allie. Thank you so much. Here's some multimedia for teen to adult, and I won't go over all of it, but you will have all the links to these. And this is the kind of thing that you can just put on social media. You can play at the beginning. If you're working with teens, I have a 17-year-old who needs a smartphone detox. And so that's a podcast, a little podcast episode, and it's really good. My favorite on this is the 2-minute 52 second video called Voicing Erasure, a spoken word piece exploring bias in voice recognition technology. I think it's beautifully done. You could use it for Poetry Month with your clientele and get them talking about something that's really important. And especially if you're working with immigrant communities or any kind of a community that doesn't speak, BBC or the standardized newscaster English. This has real ramifications. Next slide, please, Allie. So mid-range activities, if you have about half hour up to 50 minutes, I've got some different lesson plans and different things that you can do. Believe it or not, and the really fun one is a YA program from a guy named Aaron. It's a website called Adventures in Computation. And it really gives an introduction to this and a kind of model that you could use and grab little bits and pieces. I cherry pick a lot of content. I won't use somebody's entire curriculum. I'll be like, that's a good idea. That's a good activity. I'm going to grab that and take that. I really like that one a lot. Next slide, please, Allie. Thank you. I like to do videos followed by discussion. And I with my students, because I'm community college, so I have a lot of, I have non-traditional students, but I have a lot of young adults. We have high schoolers through, about 24. And one of my favorites is this toxic potential of YouTube's feedback loop that just keeps getting you down holes, and, it's just auto playing the next video, and how that has radicalized some people, how it has gotten them down the QAnon wormhole, and how these things are working on us in ways and manipulating us in ways that we're not cognizant of. So that's a fun one. I think a program that would be super fun for families is Pokemon Go Racist. My son still plays that a little bit, but it really talks about digital redlining and how there's like not gyms and the good things you can get in certain neighborhoods. And so I think that would be something that younger people could really relate to and do as an intergenerational program. It would be fun to do a scavenger hunt around your town, like where are all the gyms, where are all the things, are they in nicer neighborhoods or not? So that's a fun one, I think. Next slide, please, Allie. Thank you so much. Here are some curriculum or lesson plans. Most of these came off of Project Cora or the ACRL Framework Sandbox, which is where librarians, instructional librarians share lesson plans, and they're all really good. The ones by Chisholm, those were a series of workshops that could be scaled, and I'll talk about that more in a minute, but they could be scaled where you do a series of them over the course of a month or over the course of a week. If you really want a good intro to how Google works, I was looking at the cosmonaut in the chat earlier, the Gardner curriculum, it really lays it out there. Next one, please, Allie. I'm a huge reader, so I recommend a lot of book discussions. You heard about some of these. The Weapons of Math Destruction, Kathy O'Neill, she was the one in the video that Allie showed at the beginning. I cannot recommend that book more strongly to you. The Noble book got me started on this journey of being interested in this, so I super recommend that. And if you were gonna just read one book on this list, We Are Data, Algorithms and the Making of Our Digital Selves by Don Cheney-Lippold. I highly recommend that book because it really breaks down how we are not in control of our data selves, right? There's the real you sitting in front of your screen right now doing whatever, and then there's the data-driven you that Amazon knows, that Google knows, that your socials medias know, and those are not the same people probably. But as time goes on, they kind of merge together and you become that algorithmic person because of what information you're being exposed to based on what the technology is learning about you. If you want your head to explode, read We Are Data. And a lot of these others are from people who were in the Social Dilemma documentary. That documentary, if you've not seen it, had a very profound effect on me and how I approach teaching my students. So I recommend that if you've not done it. Next slide, please, Allie. Video screenings. If you did not know, The Social Dilemma is on Netflix, and Netflix has an educator exemption where, especially if you're in a real live classroom or in a streaming environment with your personal Netflix account, they have a list of documentaries that you are allowed to screen or show for educational purposes. No permission needed, no fees needed. The Social Dilemma is one of those documentaries. So I would definitely look at that. And then there's a whole movement that's come out of that video that I've referred to both in the handout and just a panel talking about this new foundation that's trying to change the status quo. And then I want to mention the coded bias, which was from the AI Justice League that Janice had mentioned. And I put some older ones on there too, because you can see, hey, we've been knowing about this crackling for a while. But I think being at home, being in the lockdown and being so immersed in media and not around real people has really brought our attention, focused our attention on this. Next slide, please, Allie. All right, so here's some scalable stuff. They're toolkits. Renee DeResta, I absolutely think she's amazing. I learned about her through the Social Dilemma video. And she's got a lot of videos and writing on disinformation that as a teacher in community college, I do a lot with fake news and misinformation and, you know, students who react negatively to certain news outlets because they've been conditioned from their social media to automatically discount them as biased, right? And then the A to Z of AI is really fun. They're little bite-sized explainers about AI, and I could see just like doing on your social media for like a month, a different little A to Z. Next spin, please, Allie. I mentioned Social Dilemma. The documentary has started basically a community. There's an action guide that you can use and adapt. There's some more toolkits, but I really, if you are in an educational setting, if you have a course, there is an OER curriculum and syllabi. You can do this as a week-long workshop, or you can do this as a semester-long class. It's research, unpacking the algorithms that shape our UX. On this slide, the Social Dilemma Action Guide and research, that OER guide, they're your two best bets on here. And you are going to get these slides with all of these live links as soon as we're done, I promise. Next one, Allie. All right. So that was a lot to throw at you. Allie and Janice both mentioned the Facebook civil rights audit that was done. It was released in the summer of this year. And I don't know if you have seen that or not, but this is a quote from that. The auditors believe that Facebook should do everything in its power to prevent its tools and algorithms from driving people towards self-reinforcing echo chambers of extremism, and that the company must recognize that failure to do so can have dangerous and life-threatening real-world consequences. The beautiful thing about this audit is that it was done by an outside law firm, but Facebook actually commissioned it. You probably haven't heard a ton about this. It was released during pandemic times, and it was so negative that Facebook was really kind of quiet about it. I'd love if somebody in the chat would say, yes, I've totally heard about this. Next slide, please. It's an 85-page report. There are 73 mentions of algorithms in that report. So you can see how fundamental this is. And then I'm going to let Allie speak to this one. This is her favorite quote, but this kind of has driven our whole presentation. No, Allie?
My controls seem to have disappeared. I'm not sure.
Okay. I'm like, where'd you go?
So in 2010, so 10 years ago, a Google executive said that Google's job is to get right up to the creepy line and not cross it. And I think that if that's their goal, they've either failed or they have failed to appropriately define what that creepy line is, because they are definitely, they creep me out sometimes.
I think they've crossed it since then.
Yes, I agree.
I'm going to put now in the chat the link to our Google presentation and the handout that we've been referencing. And then we'd love to hear from you if you have questions, comments, want to push back on anything we've said. We'd love to hear it.
Can also make note, we've included our email addresses on this slide as well, if you'd like to reach out to us and continue this conversation as well.
And I would say also that this, not just the conversation, but the activities that are appropriate and feasible vary a lot by the type of library that you're in. So Janice is at Hendrix College, which is a very traditional four-year institution. Shawna is at a more non-traditional community college, and then I'm in a public library. And so we all have a very different set of patrons that we're trying to share this information with. And I think that has a lot to do with the way that we might choose to disseminate some of this. There's
a question from Aaron. No, wait. No, from Kelly in the chat. It said, do you all use social media? How does your work change when you view your own personal and professional use?
I guess I'll jump in there. Yes, Kelly, I am on social media. Yes, I do. I think for me, the more that I read about this topic, I try to be even more mindful than I was before of how much time I spend on social media and the ways in which I am engaging with it. So because I know that those things that are supposed to elicit a negative response in me, those are really beneficial to the platform. And so I try, when I come across that sort of content, to not react to it, because that's what's going to keep driving that that sort of content. So just try to be really mindful of how much time I'm spending on it and the ways in which I'm interacting with it.
Also say, so I use Facebook and Twitter, and I've tried to really limit my time on Facebook because it seems to be more likely to push things at me that elicit some sort of emotional response. And I try to keep my Twitter limited to professional things. So it's all about books and literacy and those kinds of topics. And that seems to be a lot easier for me to do on Twitter than it is on Facebook.
I agree. I have accounts, but I am very rarely on them. The only reason my spouse and my parents went off Facebook after Cambridge Analytica, but I have all of the baby pictures of my son on there. It's like my photo archive. And so I just haven't downloaded my pictures, and I still sign, like my local public library runs their book group off of Facebook. What am I going to do? You know, I'm kind of forced to do that. I was a big TikTok fiend until I watched The Social Dilemma, and I have not watched TikTok. It's still installed, but I've not been active on TikTok. Just viewing, not posting. And I do a lot of viewing and not posting on things. And Twitter, Allie, I find I can control it like you by who I follow, who I choose to follow. I don't follow politicians. I follow other things that help me go.
Plus, I don't have my family on there, and they're responsible for a lot of the terrible things that I see, unfortunately. So, not my immediate family, my extended family, but.
Gabriella is saying, I don't see the movie on the Netflix educational allowed list. I haven't checked since October. We did the presentation originally in October, and it was on the list in October, but we can check again.
There was a question from Aaron a little bit higher up in the chat. Do you have any tips for discussing this with students in a way that is positive and doesn't send them and me running and screaming into the night? And so I guess I'll start addressing that, Aaron. One approach that I've used with students is coming at it from a question perspective, because many of the students have just been given the blanket statement of, you know, don't use Wikipedia, or don't use this, or don't use that, and stuff. And so I've found if I approach it as more of a question with them, of saying, do you know why your teachers have told you not to do that? Do you know why other librarians have told you not to do that? And really kind of start off in that questioning sort of way, and then start talking about how Google works, because I have found, speaking with students, that they use search all the time, but they've never actually looked at how it works. No one's ever really explained that to them and stuff. And so sometimes starting just from that is a way to kind of ease into the topic without hopefully terrifying everyone.
I use anecdotes. I say things like, have you ever been shopping for boots, and the next thing you know, your social is full of boot ads? Why does that happen? right? And students know, my students know, they just don't think they're powerful enough to do anything about it, right? They know, but they don't really know. And it seems that it almost feels like kind of fatalistic in a way to them, but it doesn't have to be that way. And so that's what I try to tell them, is that there's hope on that, right? You don't have to use Google products. I tell them if it's free, you're the product, right? You can make the investment if you're able to use Hey Email, HEY, where you pay $99, but it's totally private, right? I can change my browsing habits. There are things that they can do. I also find that they're not as concerned about it as we are, which I think is kind of part of the problem. And I think that's part of our job, is I think we kind of do have to like sound that alarm bell, that that's kind of where we are right now. The book that I was mentioning, We Are Data, they talk about how we have, right now, the way the system is set up, we have no control of our data selves. And you actually do have control of your data selves if you choose not to use the platforms, right? But how we're in colleges, Janice and I know Allie has to market her library on social medias, right? We have to like do Instagram. I have an Instagram only because my outreach librarian made me do something with students, and I had to do it on I'm like, I don't even know how to get onto this thing, Instagram. What is this?
But we have to go where our patrons are.
Yeah. But that's an organizational issue. I don't have to go where my patrons are as a person. It's a hard choice that you make.
Yeah, I'll bring up again the Age of Surveillance Capitalism book that I talked about earlier as well. This book really does, I'm a former history major in my earlier days and stuff. And so I really like having a lot of context for any discussion that we're talking about, any topic. And that's one of the things that I appreciated about this book, is that she went back in and looked at the entire system and really the whole development of the economic system. And she points out multiple times in that book that it's very common for these tech companies to present the work that they do, whether they're speaking with Congress or giving quotes to news organizations or something, is this is inherently part of their technology, that this is something that has to happen or we just can't use the technology. And she pushes back against that some in this book as well, and points out that the technology itself is only a tool. It's not inherently part of the technology. What is happened is that this has become part of the underlying economic philosophy. These are choices that people made about what was acceptable and what was not acceptable.
Exactly, Janice. There's a question from Nisia in the chat. Do you see any conflict between analysis of Google's invasiveness and using Google Docs as a tool?
I don't think so. I think somebody also in the chat had said you can critique the medium in the same medium, like an artist making a work, criticizing the commercialism of the art world. That was Sarium. And that's kind of what I think. You can acknowledge that the tool has a use and that it's a very convenient thing, while also acknowledging that there are serious structural and fundamental problems with it that alter the results that it's giving us. And I think things like Google Docs, Google Slides, those sort of programming aspects of Google aren't having quite the same effect on us. Yeah, like Janice is holding up her phone.
I have a Google phone.
Right. That's not quite the same as using Google search and being completely unaware of how the algorithms that have been developed based on your own past internet usage are affecting the results that you're seeing.
True.
I think that that's a good question, and it's meritorious of further study, because nothing I've read has or seen has addressed the tools such as Google Slides or Google Docs or Jamboard or anything like that, and what they may be doing. I mean, obviously, if you use Gmail, it's reading snippets of your emails, at least snippets, if not the whole thing. I don't know if it's doing, I've not seen anything. I've not researched it, but now you've got me curious. I work at a Microsoft school, so I answer to a different ruler.
Not that Microsoft doesn't do the exact same
I
thing.
know, I said, I'm
Right,
assuming
right.
they do the exact same
They
thing.
do. Yes.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
There's all kinds of things. I mean, I don't know if you've seen lately that Cortana keeps popping up and telling you, hey, you could do this week.
Uh,
And I've turned off Cortana about 12 times and somehow she keeps living. Oh, well.
Same.
yeah, I have all that stuff turned off. But you know, our young people, they like to share their location with people on their phone, like Snapchat, right? It's like they like to be able to know where their folks are. If you're a parent of a teenager, man, you're all about surveillance, online surveillance tools, right? You're like, where's my kid? Let me check Snapchat, right? What are you doing on that, right? Gives and takes. Did you see any other questions, Janice? I didn't.
I think there are a lot if you keep going down.
Okay.
So a little further upstream, Kelsey Cowles asked, where'd it go? Do you often encounter apathy? Like, well, they already know everything, so why should I care about this stuff now? And how do you respond or overcome that? And then later, Alan Robinette said, that's a good question. A related question, how much cynicism is too much cynicism?
I think one way, you have to connect what's going on with the people's lives, right? So I work with students. And so if you start talking about like, hey, you know, your crazy uncle that spews stuff, like everybody starts nodding in the room, right? Who's got a crazy relative?
I feel
that
like
spews
everybody
stuff,
has a
right?
crazy
It's
uncle.
universal. Everybody has some crazy family member that does weird stuff on socials. And so you can start talking about it that way. And there's something that the Project Information Literacy Report that Janice talked about, and we have a link to. What that report showed is that our teens get it. They're worried about us oldsters because they think we don't get it, right? Who is the most likely to believe and spread fake news and misinformation on the web? People over the age of 60. Proven. Look it up. Google it. Right? We're the ones who are falling prey to this. And so when you show the younger people that it's an elder problem and how, like, man, we just had an election, they get it.
Yeah, they definitely do.
Yeah, and I guess for me at my college, it's a relatively easy sell, I guess, to get students to care about this topic because it fits in very closely with something that the entire college talks about, which is being a good citizen of the world and stuff. And so it flows right into that same messaging that's been reinforced through all of their other educational experiences at the college as well. And so I guess I don't run into too much pushback on that from students.
I would think, Allie, you would experience that more in a public library because Janice and I have a little bit of authority from our positions.
I think on the one hand, there is still this sort of authoritative setup. So even if they disagree with me, they're not super likely to argue to my face. And that I realize it's a benefit of the fact that I'm in a very small, very rural library where I am not an anonymous librarian to these people. They know me, they know my background, they've known me my whole life. I see much more apathy than pushback. I could tell them about the negative effects of this until I am blue in the face and they are still going to believe whatever QAnon stuff they believe.
Mhm. And I think Kelly asked the question, does being aware of the algorithms make a difference, or is it still working on you? I think it's made a difference in my personal behavior.
I'm
So
much more willing to dig deeper than whatever
Yeah.
the first set of responses I get, because I know that those are very targeted to me based on my algorithmic data.
And another thing that's fun to do with students, especially if you're in a computer lab, and I can see doing it in a public library setting too, is you just take a straw vote poll of general people. How many of you go click? Have you ever seen this next button in your Google search results? It's harder on a phone, right? Because you're going to do some more next. But on a laptop or a PC, very few people, average people, click next. They take from the top. They very rarely scroll up. You know, they'll just sit there and nod, they laugh, they recognize their behavior. And you're like, well, how does something get on the top? Like, how did it get there? Like, why is that the thing on the top? Right. And then you explain to them, well, you know, it's a popularity contest. What's get clicked on the most? And how have they done search engine optimization to get up there? And you're like, think about high school. Were the most popular people in high school the people you want to solve your problems? And that usually makes people laugh, because I'm dealing with people right out of high school, right? They're like, oh no, I'm not calling that person. So there are ways to do it. There are ways to do it. And I don't know, has it changed you, Janice? Because we've been studying this like kind of intensely for about 6 months now, the three of us.
I think the way that it has changed me has been just in my approach, because I've read more about how this works. I am more inclined to recognize the effect that I am feeling, and that was by design, and then be able to step away from that online argument or whatever the case may be, and not actually contribute to the problem, the social problem there in that way, because I understand that part of the problem there is the algorithms are driving that animosity.
And no, somebody asked a question about DuckDuckGo. No, I can't convince my team. I have a big team of librarians. And, you know, the search is just, there's always the tension between serving the patrons, right? That's what they're used to. So no, my team won't go for it on DuckDuckGo. They use it personally. And somebody made a good comment in the chat. There's a big difference between what you do at work and what you do in your own life. I try to keep those very separate.
There's another question here in the chat. As students head home for winter break and interact with family members who see wildly different info than they do you know of a good tool or video to show them how to help their parents, uncles, etc., update their options?
I still struggle with having those conversations with my own family. I don't have a surefire one-off thing to show them that's going to turn it around. It's just a result of many, many protracted conversations, as long as I can stand it before I have to walk away.
What do you got, Janice?
I'm about there with Allie too. I mean, there's a time and a place for educational conversations, and it's not in the middle of a confrontation.
Yeah.
So if they're actually in the middle of a confrontation, that's not the time to be pulling up all of the resources and stuff. If you've got someone who's interested in learning more and actually willing to engage in that conversation, then I think there are a ton of resources. I think the TED Talks are a great place to start, because they're about 9 or 10 minutes long usually. and stuff. And so that's long enough to get into some detail, but not so long that that they're really that big buy-in in time, the way that reading the entire book might be, and stuff. And so that can give you enough of a snippet to then have a deeper conversation. There are some videos available on YouTube produced by Google about how search works. They're not a bad place to start either. They're about 5 minutes long usually. They update them every so many years as they make significant changes to the way that search works.
Mm-hmm. And I think that something that you have to remember is, in general, especially in a family dynamic, people probably love and trust you. Usually, like, I don't know if you've got a huge family, and so you can usually make inroads with loved ones if you do it from a place of love, as from a place of, I need to be right. With this, I remember my cousin's daughter, she's 28 now, but when she was little, like 4 maybe, she just straight out told my grandfather, he was a smoker his whole life, and she straight out just looked at him and she goes, you know, smoking kills you. 4 years old, right? And that's the kind of thing I can see my elders in my family taking from a youngster, like the innocence of children, that starts a conversation on that. So
Erin said in the chat just now, in her view, the pushback is not for those family members. They've already made up their mind. It's for the bystanders. And that is definitely something so I'm from a massive family. My dad is one of 15. I have 41 first cousins and 50 some odd second cousins. It's absurd. And I have gotten into arguments with some of them about this kind of stuff. And I'm always surprised by how many, after I come out and say, like, I love you, but you are wrong, how many other people come out in support of my side of the argument that I had no idea were also thinking about these things or were of the same opinion of me. And so the bystanders are definitely, I think, where the power of these conversations are.
I like that. That's a good one. Even just standing up and saying, where are you getting your facts from? Mm-hmm. But you have to remember that when people spiral into those like QAnon type scenarios, it didn't happen quickly, right?
And it's also not entirely based on logic. It's an emotional thing. And so you cannot correct an emotional situation with logic and reason. It's just not going to work.
Yeah, and there's not like one thing you can say that changes, flips the switch for people. It's a process. It's a journey.
Yes, a very, very long one sometimes.
We are just approaching the end of our time. This has been a great presentation. Do each of you have like just one key point you'd like to make at the end here?
I would just say pay attention. Every time you search for something, pay attention to the results you get and start trying to pick out when this is happening. And the more you see it, the more you'll see it.
Okay.
Hear, hear.
Yeah, and I would just say use your power. As information professionals, as students or people already in the field, you have a lot of power. You may not feel like it sometimes, but you do. And even admitting, yeah, I really wish we could use this, but we can't. And this is, you know, yeah, do like Michael Moore, live up to it. We're subversive, right, man? We're plotting the revolution, librarians.
Absolutely.
So, but Tina, thank you for inviting us, and thank everyone for their time and attention.
Thank you.
You guys are awesome.
This has been great, folks. Remember, those of you who want to come back to this session will be posted on our SLIM website. I think our Slim Tech folks may be about to post that link in just a minute. There are a lot of other great, there it is, thank you. A lot of other good presentations there as well. Feel free to just enjoy all of those you want anytime you want, they're there. And it's because of folks like this that we're able to offer that. So appreciate everyone being here today. You've got contact information for our presenters. We hope you keep thinking about this and moving forward. Thanks a lot.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye.